listening to the Minute To Midnite show, and my name's Tony. Thanks for joining me. Today on the show I have Dana Ashlie joining me, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion, as you will find as you go through it. We cover a lot of ground, and it's definitely worth listening to. Don't forget to share the video, hit the thumbs up on it as well, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so, and our iTunes channel as well. And our website, don't forget to visit that, minute2midnight.com. I want to offer a very warm welcome to a first-time guest on our show, Dana Ashlie, and it is very nice to be talking to you today, Dana.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
And it's my pleasure. And I know a lot of our listeners actually follow you on YouTube as well, because when I mentioned that we were going to be looking at getting you on, there were a lot of people, oh, we really like her, we follow her as well. So so it's really nice to have the chance to actually talk to you today. But maybe for those that don't know who you are, you could give a little bit of a background into who you are and kind of what you do and so on.
No problem. Great. Thanks for asking. It's not surprising to me that we would have some of the same listeners because of our emphasis in prophecy and looking at the current events and how they're playing into the end days, so to speak. So that makes sense to me. But I definitely always was not involved in any kind of prophecy in any way, although I have been involved in what you would call the truther aspect of things for a very long time. I lived in Seattle in around 2000, well, actually right before 9/11 happened. And I was actually involved in promoting talks about that in around 2002. And while I was there, I also published a magazine talking about, it was an eco type magazine talking about the heavy metals, fluoride, alternative education, why to buy organic and all this sort of thing, which is really preaching to the choir in Seattle, as you can imagine. I was also a vegetarian then, not anymore, but I was really into that. So anyway, just all that sort of thing. But I really got involved in the New Age movement for most of my life. And it kind of moved me away from getting into the truther movement so much, because I don't know how much you know about the New Age, but it tends to say, focus on the positive and you create your reality. And so if you get into these darker things, it's sort of like, not exactly what you want to quote unquote create for yourself.
It's interesting though, because the founders of the New Age movement were actually the same people that instigated the New World Order and the whole direction. Well, it goes back before them, but they basically took it on to the next level. Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, and then of course Alice A. Bailey, her writings, her 24 books are full of basically blueprint for the New World Order. So
isn't that convenient of them to create a movement that would keep people from wanting to focus on those things? So what you just said was actually what I learned in about 2015. And so although if we skip back to Seattle again, back then again, law of attraction, Esther Hicks. And then I moved to Seattle and of course saw, sort of what Hollywood was doing and felt kind of the ugliness of Hollywood. Although it was from a distance, I never really got too close, just mild production jobs and things like that. But through my daughter being born about 10 years ago, I would say that was when things started changing within me. And, when you have a daughter and you see just all of the yuck in the world, you tend to want a more pure existence for your kid. It actually made me become more sensitive to violence and just you can't even drive around LA without seeing like just really horrible imagery. And that was just, all big awakening. And then the first seed that was planted in me regarding the truth of prophecy actually was my daughter having a dream about the mark of the beast and the Antichrist. And she never even knew the name Jesus. So that was really big for me. I didn't really want to think of it as true. I was very hard-headed against Christianity, being grown up in the Bible Belt. I just was very opposed to it. So I put it on a shelf, although it was definitely a shaker-upper. And then fast forward a few years, and all the stuff with the elections and all the shootings and everything, it kind of pulled me back into the truther movement. And that's when I learned what you just said about the Lucius Trust and Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and all those guys. And boy, when you find out the very thing you believe in and you think is true is a lie, I mean, for me, it shook me to my core, and it was very humbling for me. And so I mean, if there's that moment of truth where you get on your knees and you say, okay, what's true? And I was like calling out to God in my own way. And then I started getting dreams and visions, and they were not good. They were warning dreams. And then when I learned that there were thousands and thousands of other people who were having the very same warnings, that got my researcher going. And so, yeah, this all kind of pulled me into the direction of the prophecy, and then learning that the Bible actually says in Acts 2:17, in the end days, I will pour my spirit upon all flesh. It all started making sense, and I lost my judgment against it, and I just said, show me the truth. And I think that's why I like talking to truthers the most, because if they really are seeking the truth, they will find it, but it's the people who have a very firm idea of what they think is true that are hardest to reach. And when we look at how the right and the left are kind of programming people to think they know their version of truth, they're really kind of hard to reach. But I think the video that you saw of mine was the RF video, where I learned about the truth about the electromagnetic fields and what is really happening with the Wi-Fi routers and the cell phones. That was through personal experience of being impacted by these fields. And so when I learned how really horribly detrimental they are for people, it's just my nature to want to share it with others. And so it's been great. A lot of people have told me that they're making big changes in their lives after turning off their Wi-Fi and these things. So I'm excited about it, and glad that it got me to be able to talk with you today.
It's really interesting because there is so much disinformation out there, and the so-called truther community, so many of them reject the ultimate truth, which is Jesus Christ and our need for salvation. True. And it's sort of like when you don't have that aspect of it, you suddenly miss the plot, really, and who is behind everything. So once you actually find that out, and that the Bible is basically lays out the sort of what's going to happen, and that we need Jesus, the whole thing starts to make sense. And the other side of that is, say we get to the RF stuff, that's just one example of people are going to go, you're a conspiracy theorist, and they don't want to know. You're a tinfoil hat wearer, all that. I mean, sure, you get that. I know I've had it. But the fact of the matter is, the more you research this stuff, all the pieces of the puzzle come together and start making sense, don't they?
Absolutely. And back when I was talking about 9/11 and these sorts of things, Alex Jones says he's a Christian. I mean, I always look at people's fruit. But David Icke, he gets deep into some truths about, United Nations agenda, David Wilcock and these guys. But you notice that they start edging you into the alien agenda, or, lizard people or whatever. They take it to this other place. And I believe that those people are actually, a part of the plan, even though they're talking about some pretty deep truths about the dark side of what the beast is up to. But the solution that they give you, is always, they know that this is a war for souls. That's what it is. And if you think that you're going to ascend into light because you just love each other, unfortunately, of course, we're meant to love each other, but it's so much more than that. Jesus called for other things for us to do, and they're not pointing to the truth of Jesus. They're a part of the problem. Although, for me, it definitely was along my path. So I appreciate having been through all of it, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, these people are talking to rooms full of tens of thousands of people. They're not being persecuted by the beast,
And I found it really interesting to note, too, that the supposed allies, or good guys, that are fighting against all of this, call what they have supposedly the plan with a capital P. And it's like, Oh my gosh, put two and two together. That is what the beast's plan is. Alice A. Bailey called it the plan, and these people are supposedly the truth about exposing, everything else, and yet they're calling it the plan. It's sort of like, no, I bet there's the same puppet masters pulling the strings on both sides of
Incredible. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I am often in awe of how organized the dark side has been and how they've captured the market on pretty much every option out there. And sadly, that includes a lot of people who call themselves Christians as well. And I guess that's why the path is narrow, and a lot of people like hearing that, but it's the case.
Yes. And, you get into the whole thing with this QAnon and the supposed 63,000 sealed indictments. And I think it's just part of the psyop, to be honest.
I do too. Absolutely. But you have to remember, like, apocalypse means in Greek, the great unveiling. And so it's all truth will be revealed. It's not going to be pretty truth, but they have set these people up in power for the very purpose of saying, oh, look, these are the bad guys. We have to take them down. Because once we say, well, all government is corrupt. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Well, we'll just have one government. And we'll make sure that it's absolutely of love and light and equality. And, we're all just going to live in peace and harmony and let the robots do all the work for us. All you have to do is sit back and take your check and, tell your robot, whatever they're going to say. It's going to sound great, I'm sure. But, once you get that device, and I do believe in an actual mark. I know this is a contended topic, but for my own daughter's dream about receiving a mark, and she used the word mark. She's 4 years old. She's like, Mama, I got a mark in my hand. Why would she even say that? It was amazing. And so, but she was in terror. She was in deep regret because she did it. She took it and she knew that it couldn't be undone. And so because of that,
And she'd never heard the Bible with the mark of the beast and all that stuff, had she? 4 years old, and she had a dream that basically outlines all that. See, that's powerful because, it's not somebody that's sort of watched a movie or knew all that stuff. It's somebody that had no knowledge of it, and yet it's come through. So
no, God knew that it was going to take a very big waking up, and that she would be the way to do it. And to be fair, she was completely protected from almost all media. I didn't even really let her watch like normal cartoons. Like there was no SpongeBob, there was no nothing. We watched Little Bear. I don't know if you've heard of that, but like that was about it. So, and then on the other hand, we did all the rituals that people affiliate with Christmas, which really has nothing to do with what Jesus taught, in my opinion. But she never heard the word Jesus. She knew nothing of the stories of the Bible. I did not believe in them at all. I'm embarrassed to say today, but that's just the fact of the matter. So she had no idea. And she described the Antichrist as this king that rose up that everyone adored and trusted. And they did it because, he said it would be okay. And she described people standing in line to get this mark. So it was huge. And again, I was still hard-headed, and at least I had the forethought to record it as it was happening. And I kept it on my iPhone for like 5 years until I started getting my own dreams. So that was one of the first videos I uploaded, actually.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's definitely pretty amazing. And yeah, I personally believe that I think most likely the mark of the beast will be a DNA changing chip.
I agree. I absolutely agree, because in studying the dreams and visions that I've seen, that's what happens to people. And I think that's why the warning is so huge against it. It is as if, it is through the free will that God gave us that we have the ability to turn to him and repent, right?
Yeah.
But once you take this mark, I believe that, especially when you study the people who are dealing with this nanotech coming out of their skin, and like these people who are electrical magnetic sensitive, there are people who are actually dealing with, I believe, some of this technology that is able to assimilate itself within the body, and believe that it's able to change the DNA internally and therefore override the will, which is why the warning against it is so strict. within Revelation to do not take it.
Yeah, I agree. And well, we could go on in that area,
Yeah.
but I think we'll get sidetracked and not get to our main topic, which is actually the electromagnetic radiation side of all of this. Now, what led you into you made that video, which is a must watch for people that haven't watched it. Can you remember the name of it offhand?
I do change the names a few times just to kind of see what tends to resonate with people. I believe now it's a wireless warfare and includes ways to protect your family against it. So I want people to know that there are ways that they can shield against these frequencies because there are several different electromagnetic fields. But the specific one that the video is about is the microwave frequencies that things like your cell phone and Wi-Fi routers and cordless phones and all the wireless technology that we're all being encouraged to have all throughout our house. Anything smart basically means wireless, and anything wireless runs on microwave fields that deeply impact the biology of the body, which I did not want to believe was true because I was a Wi-Fi hopper. I loved my Wi-Fi, but yeah, so through editing a lot and sitting down in my Wi-Fi at home, I was on the computer a lot more than I had been previously. And I started getting brain fog to the point of I couldn't gather my thoughts. And I started getting huge amounts of fatigue. And, I talk about this in the video, but it also just encouraged me to say, well, wow, I think I've been having migraines I've been suffering with every couple months for the same number of years that I've had Wi-Fi. And so it just caused me to look into it deeper. And through the video, I explained, because most people will hear this and they'll want to argue for their limitations. They'll be like, but wait, there are studies that say that this caused no effect, And so I had to kind of show what sponsored science is, how has big telecom been able to create this pseudoscience to keep us all just not questioning anything. And so that's kind of how I open it up so that people realize that they need to look beyond the pseudoscience. And I show them the scientists whose houses were burned down when they started reporting the truth. I show them, the science as it's actually coming out and the stuff that people don't really want to look at. And the way that it's impacting the children was really just upsetting to me. And so when I hear about the kids and the innocent having to deal with this, we know what ADD is happening in this country. We know autism, what is happening. It is an epidemic of proportions that we can't even fathom. If it continues at the rate that it is now, over half the people will have autism. I mean, it's insane. So we have to start looking beyond what doctors are saying. And I think a lot of people are already questioning like the medical fields. I think enough of us have had, experiences ourselves to know that medicine is just masking symptoms. It's not actually bolstering true health. And so, so a lot of my past has been in health. And so I've already been through I used to think it was all about the food, only buy organic, only eat vegetables. I've been through all that. I used to think, I got into dejuicing and fasting, and I'm still a big believer in fasting. But what I came to learn over the years was that heavy metals are a huge part of ill health, whether it is in your teeth or the fluoride that is in the water, whether it is the aluminum and barium that's coming into the air and groundwater. It seems like everywhere we turn, we're being forced to have metals put into our body. And especially after having this video out, I've had some families that took my advice, and the stories that they're getting back to me about how it is changing their family and the attention spans of their children and the harmony in their children. I mean, it's incredible. So it seems to me that these metals in our body are being deeply impacted by these frequencies, particularly the microwave frequencies. I mean, we've all put aluminum in the microwave on accident, right?
Yeah.
I know that's an extreme example, but yet it's really what's happening. I mean, think about it. we are electromagnetic beings, and we have a God-given frequency. And when we walk on the earth with our bare feet, we are in that frequency, which is very similar to our own. It's called the Schumann resonance. So what the beast is doing is it's forcing all these artificial frequencies on us, and it's impacting our emotions. We know that RF causes depression, anxiety, infertility. I mean, look at our health. It's sad how sick we are. And when you start looking into this really deeply, it all makes sense with RF in conjunction with these metals.
We can't really escape from it. This is the thing. To some extent, you can limit your exposure to it, but we can't really escape from it. And for so many people with their work and everything, they depend on it. It's kind of like, wow, the whole thing. It's only going to get worse. That's the worst part about it in many ways. Yeah.
I know. I believe me, the last thing I want to do is overwhelm people. And the reason why I quit putting on the talks in 9/11 back in the day was that people came out with their heads hung down low and their shoulders slumped.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what I want to do. But what I do want to do is we have to at least talk about it, and we have to at least not add needless radiation to our lives. We all had internet 8 years ago before we had Wi-Fi routers. We just used cables. We used Ethernet cables. And in fact, we've all become more used to using our phones than our computers. But if you have your Ethernet cable set up in your house and you turn that Wi-Fi router off, which, by the way, when you listen to it with an RF meter, it sounds like a machine gun. I kid you not. But when you have the Ethernet cables instead, and you can get adapters for your phone so that you put your phone on airplane mode, which is no RF coming out of it, and you put the cable right into your phone. You can actually be on your phone on the internet, not using your, cellular data, and still do what you need to do. It just takes a little work to get things transferred over. But the 5G, there's a reason why they're pushing that out. I don't know if that's happening down where you are, but up here, that definitely is a linchpin that will change things to a degree that's not good. One of the people that I had contact me after I put this video out was a woman who worked for Department of Homeland Security in the airports here in America. And I don't know if you've seen those machines. You kind of stand in them and they can see through your clothes and stuff. Well, those are actually 5G millimeter machines. And the woman stated to me, she didn't really want to be identified, but she said that she worked around them for 3.5 years, and she saw 28 people die in that time.
Wow.
Through various cancers, and some people just collapsed on the scene, on the spot, and were dead. So it's going to be, I think, called like some kind of pandemic. They're going to call it something other than what it is, but the more we become familiar with these frequencies now, I've actually gotten rid of all of them in my house. You got to get rid of your handheld phones, the wireless phones. Go old school. Remember the 80s? We had those cords. You have corded phones.
Yeah.
It's you have nothing wireless. It can be done. It can certainly be done. I don't want to overwhelm people. There are steps that we can take. But sending your kids to school with Wi-Fi is my biggest concern right now. And I'm trying to develop some products that can help protect kids. There's actually clothing that you can put on to reflect this stuff as well, believe it or not. Yeah, it's a real hat, man.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they coined that term right up there with conspiracy theory, I think.
Well, we should go into business selling tinfoil hats, you reckon?
Mine's going to be much more stylish than tinfoil hat.
Yeah. Well, actually, after watching your video, the first thing I did was I didn't realize I had a cordless phone in the house, and I went straight away, put it away, and plugged my old corded phone back in.
That one was so upsetting to me. I say this in the video, but I was like, what? Yeah. I've been paying extra for this cell phone tower to be in my house for 10 years or something.
Yeah. Yes, it's a bit of an eye opener. Yeah, I'm still working out what to do with certain aspects. I've always turned off my Wi-Fi at night and all of that, like everything before I go to bed. But yeah, it's still left me with what do I do in terms of the cell phone and the iPad and all of those kind of things. Uh,
It can be wired. Just figure out all the places where you're normally sitting, and then you just have an Ethernet cable there to plug in. I mean, for people who are listening, they may not. Maybe we should tell them a couple of the things that this is causing, so that they understand they would even need to take.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll do that. I mean, I've always had my computer plugged into Ethernet. I've never used my computer on Wi-Fi at here. It's because it's much more stable anyway. But then you have an iPad and a cell phone, and that's just like okay, now I got to rethink that as well. So,
Right.
but yes, start to tell people what some of the symptoms are and
Yeah.
what's the problem with all of
In
this.
the case of the Wi-Fi, or sorry, not just a Wi-Fi router, but you have a transmitter, an antenna that is on your Wi. Whenever your phone is on Wi-Fi at home, it becomes a transmitter as well. So it's these multiple signals wherever you're picking up on Wi-Fi. But so one of the things that the government has known for a very long time, through the work of a scientist by the name of Alan Fry in the 60s, he worked for the Office of Naval Research, I believe. He discovered that microwave frequencies open up the blood-brain barrier. And I mean, when you think about the huge impact and increase of people, everybody knows Michael J. Fox. He has Parkinson's. We have all these younger people who are having Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. This is because the blood-brain barrier is opening up, and we're getting things in the brain that ought not be there. All of this makes perfect sense. So, another thing, besides the blood-brain barrier being open, which I think is a reason enough, one of the first things that happens to people with one of the most vulnerable cells in the human body to RF are the human reproductive cells. So that's the sperm and the egg. And the DNA is being broken in the mitochondria of these cells within a very short period of time. And sperm cells, they now know, once in an RF environment, will swim in circles, not straight. And when you start looking at the basically the reproduction rate of this country, just take a look at what the CD has said themselves. I believe it was last year and the year before. Our levels they've fallen off a cliff. It's like, what? And people are like, oh, it's just the millennials because they don't know how to talk to each other. But even abortion rates are down. Rates are down in every, whether it's the white people are actually reproducing, they're dying off faster than they're reproducing. And in every instance, we are not making babies like we used to. And it is absolutely tying in, I believe, with the impacts of RF on these two cells. So that's pretty huge for people who are trying to, reproduce. And if you do want to make sure that your future children have as good of a chance as possible, there are studies from Denmark that showed that basically they put the mice in the condition, they put the mothers in the RF, and the offspring of those mice who were in an RF environment had increased anxiety, depression, and inability to learn. So they know that mice can get through one of those little mazes in a certain period of time, right? Well, the mice whose mothers in vitro, these mice were in vitro at the time when they got the RF, not after. After they were born and grew up, they were not able to get through that maze as quickly. In fact, it took 3 times as long as the mice who did not have the RF in vitro.
Wow.
That's huge. And when you think about what the beast wants, is he wants us to be incapable of comprehending what's happening. What a perfect way to do it, And so when you look at the Georgia Guidestones, you're like, okay, well, they want to keep the population below 500 million. Well, they know they can't just come out and murder us openly, but if they keep us from reproducing, well, that's pretty brilliant, What a way to do it. And do it through something that we're addicted to, like Instagram, rather than, open tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely good point. Very good point. What other problems does it create?
What doesn't it create, I guess, is kind of would be easier to
Yeah.
cover, maybe.
I
But
think a big telling thing that was what you showed in the video was the Russians in the Cold War, how they beamed RF frequencies at the American consulate in Russia and what happened. And they knew about the microwave technology back then.
that's the thing, and that's what I think makes it beyond just, oh, these are just corporations wanting to make money and whatever. Unfortunately, I think it's darker than that, because there's no way that we can say that our government doesn't know that these problems happen. Something that one letter that I got in particular, I would love to bring up, because it was just so incredibly impactful, and I think would leave a deep impression on people as to what this can do to people. Let me just pull this up. There was a mother that called me, or there was one particular person who saw the video, and she sent me an email explaining to me how her family and her life had changed as a result of watching the video. And essentially, she had a child who had myoclonic seizures starting at the age of 2. Within a short period of time of receiving a flu shot, she started having up to 30 seizures a day. And up to that point, she was perfectly healthy, good eye contact, totally normal development. And after these seizures, she basically lost all of her speech within a short period of time. After that, was diagnosed with autism. So this is a child who, after going through all this, essentially was so challenged that temper tantrums doesn't even really do it justice. It was more like, she said she would bite them, she would spit at them, she would scream, nonstop. And this poor girl couldn't stand clothing, just the tactile. A lot of autistic children have tactile issues. And so she's like, I would just have to just get pantyhose on her just to get her out the door. It was that bad. And so you can just imagine every day this kind of horrible, interaction with your child who is suffering so much. So she tried different things. In fact, I won't go into all this now, but through prayer, they actually, her seizures stopped overnight. Her doctor couldn't believe it. But beyond that, she never got her speech back, and she was still having all these really incredible tantrums and just really, really horrible levels of autism and symptoms of that. So she saw my video. They had tried diets and things, and nothing really worked too much. She turned off everything, got rid of Wi-Fi. I mean, this woman is amazing. She took every bit of advice and then some. She said within the next day, her child started putting together 3-word sentences that she had never heard her say before. She said she was smiling. She kept saying, I feel good. I feel good. She said she was just a completely different person. Before this happened, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there is a scale of autism from 1 to 100, where they rate the worst is 100. I mean, this is someone who will never function normally, probably will be an adult in diapers their whole lives, like completely not able to function. And then 1 to 7, even just kind of normal. You wouldn't even know that they had autism. So before it started, she was in the 60s, okay? Within a week of turning off the wireless in her home, she was in the 20s. And she has since told me that now her number is in the teens.
Wow.
I mean,
that's huge,
incredible.
Isn't it?
I mean, I'm just like, was this just a single incident, or like, could we really impact people in just incredible ways by getting rid of these frequencies? And so she now is, there's some other things that I've learned about how to deal with, because autism is reversible. Nobody really wants to hear that, but it has to do with the heavy metals and things like that. So they'll admit, well, autistic children are maybe autistic because they don't have the genetic propensity to get rid of the metals in the body, right? They're not chelating the metals like normal children, but they won't tell you that radio frequency breaks the genes in the DNA that could actually cause you to not be able to do that in the first place. So, it's just putting all the pieces together, and I feel blessed that I've had a background in health and that it was easier for me to see the bigger picture, to help people in this way because of it. Crazy.
Wow, that is very, very significant. Yes. So what changes have you personally made?
Besides getting rid of wireless, like we said, it's kind of like going back to 2008. So at first the wires were kind of annoying, but now I've got them all tucked away. I still was getting Wi-Fi from a neighbor, and it was measuring on my. I actually got my own little meter, and so I don't own my own home. If I did, I would use there are actually paints that have metals in them that will block this stuff. If I owned my own home, I would do something like that. But because I'm just here for a short time, I just put some screen over it and it bounces it off. But yeah, I just got rid of everything quote unquote smart. In California, they have an opt-out program for smart meters, and a lot of people are getting really sick from their smart meters because they are putting out frequencies. Another thing that a lot of people will probably relate with, I should mention, is that one of the first things that starts happening to a lot of people is that they lose their ability to sleep properly. And that is because the pineal gland inside the brain actually produces your melatonin that helps you to sleep. The way that the pineal gland knows that it's time to release the melatonin is because the EMF from the sun, again, a natural God-given EMF frequency, is gone down, and so it doesn't sense the sun anymore, and it says, okay, now it's time to put out the melatonin. Well, when you're creating artificial frequencies in your home, your pineal gland does not know that the sun has not gone down, and so it's holding on to that melatonin, which in and of itself, yes, we all know that we need sleep, but further, melatonin has been cited through reputable studies to actually prevent cancer and treat cancer. And so your body is also holding on to the natural hormone and substance that repairs the DNA in the body to prevent you from getting cancer. So we are indirectly increasing our chance of getting cancer just by having the Wi-Fi on at night so that our melatonin isn't being released. So a lot of people who are having sleep issues, which is, from what I understand, a very large portion of people. They say in America it's like 50 to 70,000 or 50 to 70 million people. It probably has a lot to do with these artificial frequencies that you're not being able to rest from all through the night. So turn that stuff off at night, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is the reason for 5G's rollout? Is it just for better technology so people have better cell phones and better, wireless to do their stuff and they can play more games quicker and all that? Or do you think there's something more sinister behind it?
I could tell by the way you asked that. You already know what I think.
Yeah. I just want your opinion. Yeah.
Well, I believe that 5G is sort of like the nervous system of the beast. It's not only is it going to enable the people who control it to manipulate the frequencies, so they literally could cause us to feel different emotions based on how they manipulate the frequencies. This is something that's been studied by the military for a really long time. So if they're able to manipulate our actual emotions, you can only imagine what that could do. But further, it's a surveillance program. So the smart meters, they like to say the smart meters are there because they're trying to help your bills go down. I don't even remember what good things they say that it did, but it basically did none of them.
Yeah.
But if, like, the old day we had the analog meter and you had the meter man come out and he'd read. Okay, so that's gone now. So if they were only trying to read your meter, they would only do it once a month. But instead, these pulses are happening about 7 times per minute. And so basically, they can tell when your fridge is open. They can tell when your hairdryer is on. And the more smart appliances you get, they can absolutely spy on everything that you are doing. So if you look into the United Nations agendas where they want to, quote unquote, reduce carbon emissions, and the story will be, I believe, Tony, that the earth is going to die if we don't rein in our usage. And as human beings who breathe out carbon dioxide, carbon is the devil, right? We're the problem, right?
Yeah.
And so every time you're in an airplane or every time you buy a banana that came from Costa Rica rather than, wherever closer by, you're taxed. And so I think they want to go to a system that isn't about money, but it's about this. Basically, it's so that we have tax for every single thing that we do, every single thing that we use, every appliance that we use, and it's a surveillance system. I think it's going to control us through making sure that we're not using things we ought not be using, not using too much power. And on top of it, we know it's going to make people really sick, because I've already talked to people who have worked with these machines. The lady that I was telling you that was at the airport that saw these people die, it's certainly going to be impacting us. There are people who know a lot more about 5G than I do, but I know it's not good. And I know when you listen to Tom Wheeler, who really pushed this through back when Obama was in office, speak, it's just incredible that, people can't see through that man. I mean, he worked for big telecom for over 10 years. It's so obvious to me, but yeah, there's nothing about it that's good. And the scientists who've studied it the most are like, what are you doing? Stop.
Yeah. And it's being pushed under Trump's administration just as hard as it was under Obama. So it's going forward, it's not being stopped. And the other thing I think about with the whole thing is the fact that they've got these big towers and so on. And are you familiar with the whole voice of God type of idea, the voice of God technology and all of that side of things?
Yeah, you should check out the video that I did about the mass shooters and the voice of God technology. That was probably one of my first videos that wasn't about prophecy. My other big prophecy videos are about America being the Whore of Babylon and all that. But I did a video about Nick Cruz hearing voices, and I started digging into a very, very long list of mass shooters who all actually were, they don't dwell on that too much. It comes out in the beginning before they create the main narrative about whatever reason someone became a mass shooter. But I was able to find dozens and dozens of mass shooters who had this very same voice to skull technology. And yeah, I'm sure 5G would have a hand in being able to control that as well. I'm sure you're probably absolutely right. It's a deep, dark hole. It's scary, which is why we have to say, you know what, we were told it would be this way, and we have to have peace and not be in fear about this, and know that we are protected, and not always easy to do. But we can't stick our head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I hope my channel is a bit of a ray of light in that way, so that people feel like, because some people get into this stuff and they don't feel like they have anybody they can relate with. I'm sure you've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
But there are things we can do. And spiritual warfare is a very big part of this. And that's actually my next video. I'm working on a spiritual warfare video, because I think that's something that most of the churches don't talk about at all.
No, it's become less and less talked about. Once upon a time, it was talked about more than it is nowadays. And in terms of that voice to skull technology, people, again, they go, you're just wearing a tinfoil hat. There's no such thing. But there are. I mean, look, for a start, if people are thinking that, go check out for yourself these two patents. The Lowry patent number 6052336, apparatus and method for broadcasting audible sound using ultrasonic sound as a carrier. Go look for that one. Look for another one, US 6470214. I've got all of these patents, and there are others, but it's undeniable that they've been working on this technology for a long time. In fact, the first developments of it were probably going back as far as World War II. And so, it's become far advanced. I'm no expert on it, but there's certainly plenty of information out there to show you that this isn't just some conspiracy nut
No, it's
job
not.
theory,
You're right. The patents are all there if anyone bothers to look. But, one of the ways that Beast gets away with this is it keeps us all just staying afloat with our jobs, our 40-hour-a-week jobs, and the kids, and all these things that we have to attend to. When does one have time to research all these things? Which is why broadcasts like yours are so important. I hope to be helping in that way some on my channel. It's real. It's happening. And if we are just in this delusion that, just like the New Age said, it's all going to get better. We're going to evolve,
Yeah.
coming to they called it the Christ consciousness, but it's going to get worse before he comes again and it gets better. So we need to be willing to face that, and we need to be prepared for that. And the technology is there, and the Beast doesn't play fair. That I know.
Yep, absolutely. And the technology's there for that side of things, and I think 5G will be used as a carrier for it. Then you mentioned all the heavy metals we've got in the sky being sprayed, all the time. People will go, another conspiracy theory nut job thing. There's no such thing as chemtrails. I totally disagree. Having seen airplanes for my whole life, there was never the trails that we see now from jets lasting over and over and over, and begin filling the whole sky and so on. So they can use that. And I think that affects the whole 5G, and everything. And then with that, it also makes a possibility for the holographic projectors of the blue beam technology as well. And you get to the point where they could, I think, combine all of these things. The auditory hearing effect being used through the wireless technology and so on, and with holographic technology they could, you just don't know what false signs and wonders they will produce through it all.
I totally agree with you, and so that's why I'm trying to put some research and time into products that help people to pull these metals out of their body. I have attained the website domain defeatthebeast.com. So there I'm going to be carrying information and products that not only can help shield people against some of the frequencies, but also there are some magnetic devices. I mean, there are forms of these magnetic fields that actually could be healing people. There are forms of magnetic frequencies that can actually help. And I'm trying to look into that by studying some of because I don't know if you've heard this either, Tony, but these microwave frequencies, just like ionic frequencies, so there's X-rays, which is the ionized frequencies, and then there's non-ionic radiation, which is the microwaves and things below. So X-rays are accumulative, and that when you go to the dentist, they put the lead thing over you so that you don't get extra X-rays. Well, so unfortunately, the microwaves are also accumulative. So what has happened with certain people is that over time they have become extremely impacted and sensitive, and they can feel when someone's texting behind them. They know what's going on because they're full, right? And so I'm trying to find products, and whether it's herbs or machines that actually can pull things out. There are all kinds of different things that we can do to try to undo this accumulation and make ourselves more balanced. Grounding is great. By walking barefoot on the ground, actually, if you're not around, make sure you're not like under power lines or whatever, but that's one way to kind of like come back into the frequency that we were given. There are a lot of things we can do. So I'm trying to kind of provide some things for that, just so it's hard to study all this stuff and know where to get different things. So I'm going to try to get a place that's together all in one spot. It's not up yet, but that's what I hope to do in the future, because it's one of the things they use to their advantage is just all of the disinformation and the information overload. It's really hard to know which way to turn. So, yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of deliberate disinformation and misinformation out there to throw people off the trail, I think. And you get a lot of people that will throw out their a bunch of truth, but with that they'll toss the lie in there, and people are hooked because of the truth, and then they'll send you know, a lot of the supposed anti-New World Order people, which I think are just basically con jobs, really, that they're controlled opposition, or they're not even real opposition. They're actually set up by the very system they're supposedly talking against. And that's just part and parcel of it. So actually sorting through what's truth and what's disinformation becomes quite hard. So if you're setting up a resource that will hopefully be on the level with the truth, well, that will certainly help people. So what will be that domain name again?
It's actually defeatthebeast.com.
Cool. Have you got a splash screen or anything up for it yet? Or?
Yeah, it's just up, under construction right now. But
Cool.
one of the first things I'm trying to do, because the children, it just bothers me that they're sitting in this Wi-Fi. I'm developing some undershirts and underwear and things for children to wear under their clothes, so that they're not picking up on all that radiation while they're in school. The reproductive organs are particularly important, and of course the iPad has the transmitter at the bottom of the iPad right next to where these children are holding it. We're basically sterilizing our future generations, without a doubt. Without a doubt. It's if you get into the people who are studying this, Dr. Klinghardt, Barry Trower, there are just so many amazing people who have put their life's work into this, and they are just screaming from the rooftops, and no one's listening. So I don't want us to have to start seeing, deformed babies everywhere before this happens. We have the ability to block this stuff now and to shield it now. So why not just play it safe and, reduce the radiation now before we have to deal with it later, before we're dealing with it in our own personal lives. I've always kind of been like that. I've always been into preventative health. So it's been a good thing, but it's hard to, not everyone's like that. Not everybody wants to, usually people have to get kind of sick before they'll do anything,
Yeah.
but we have an opportunity to do it. Another interesting thing about RF that I was kind of blown away by is that, parasites love it, and mold does very well in the RF environment. There was a study, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, you got to look into his work if you haven't seen it already. He was quoted as promoting a study where a mold in an RF environment versus mold in a clean environment produced 600 times more mycotoxins than the mold that was in a clean environment. And I don't know if you've had any experience with mold, but my goodness, it causes a lot of damage. And parasites in the body too, they eat this stuff. I mean, they love heavy metals. And so a lot more people are dealing with heavy parasites than people realize. But it's kind of funny. There are scriptures in the Bible that talk about, there's one scripture it talks about the locusts, and like overrunning everything. And we know that
Joel chapter 2, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that RF is disrupting the migration patterns of animals, and birds are falling out of the sky. And like all of these fish are, coming up. And so when we start disrupting these huge portions of the food chains, I mean, it makes sense to why the bugs may take over, if all the birds die off or what have you. We know that bees are being heavily affected by these EMFs. Sometimes people aren't as motivated when it's people that are having problems, but that animals have problems and they want to do something. So, if you're one of those people, please look into the impacts of EMFs on the animals, because they're not talking about that. They're not talking about that. That is exactly what's happening, though.
Yes, you've got to wonder with all the whale strandings and things too, what's going on there. Could it be that that's part of it, that they've been disrupted by these EMFs?
Absolutely. Because they have their own, they have their own ways that they're, just like we get up in the morning, or we go to bed at night with that, they also have their own forms of how they migrate and things. These are all very subtle God-given systems that we have, and they are being disrupted.
I wonder if anyone's done a experiment or study with bats as well on this. It'll be interesting to know and see if it's affecting bats. I don't know. But
True. I don't know. I haven't heard of that yet.
Yeah, because we know, everything they do is based on sonar and so on. So, so what's your YouTube channel called?
Dana Ashlie is DanaAshlie. So
they just look up for that and they'll find your various videos on YouTube. Cool. So, yep. Excellent. Now, we've covered quite a bit here. Have you got anything else that you just, want to close up with before we wrap up?
No, thank you so much, Tony, for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's always nice to speak with someone of like mind, and now that I know about you, I can start digging into your old archives and seeing some of your other videos. My next projects are going to be, again, about spiritual warfare. Because I think that's a huge aspect. Yeah. One of the first things Jesus did was he was casting out demons. And I think we have the wrong idea about what demons are and what they look like. I think it's much more subtle. With movies like The Exorcist, they make it seem all dramatic and everything. But anyone who's suffering with addictions and, anger, big, when someone has an uncontrollable temper or, problems with lust and all these things. These are all tied in with the spiritual war that we're all in. And so we all need to be able to handle that and use the word of God to fight that. And I'm also looking into these fires in California, being in California myself. I feel very strongly that these are not natural fires. And so I'm putting together what will be a pretty hard-hitting and convincing video to show people that this is much worse than 9/11 with what's going on with the California fires as well.
Sounds good. So, it's been awesome to have you on the show today. We'll have to touch base again and do it again in 2019, I reckon.
Sounds good. I love it. Take care, Tony.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget to like this video, folks, and share it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our iTunes channel. We publish our shows in audio-only format on iTunes, as well as on Video Press and YouTube, and on our website as well. And we do run a Minute to Midnight by donations, and I want to thank those people that do donate and you help us out. It's been amazing, and thank you to the people that donated money towards me getting a new recording mixer, which is now up and running, and I'm very grateful for it because it's running great, and I'm certainly happy to have it. So thanks, folks, who helped out with that. And all the music is also written, played and recorded by me that's used in the shows, and I'm able to use that mixer for recording the music as well. So thanks again, folks. I think that's it for this show. God bless, have a great week, and we'll catch you again in a few days' time with another episode of the A Minute to Midnight show.